When we looked outside, we saw the deepest black blue imaginable. He thought of it as something beyond language, requiring a whole new system of descriptors. It was a solid blue-black world, one which seemed born of a single vibration. What he wanted was to go deeper than the sun's rays. The horizon of his desire was a step beyond solar light.
I've recorded this introduction 3 times, and I am tired of it, so we're just going to go through it. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Literary Canon. I hope everyone is doing fantastic. I know this video is a little overdue. I was doing one every week, but I think I'm going to start doing one every other week now. Every week is just too much for me to keep up. So a video every other week at this point. I will see if I can keep up with that. I hope I can. I am still reading Don DeLillo's Underworld, slowly making my way through it. It is phenomenal, but it is a lot to take in, and I am reading it a little bit slower because of that. But I did finish a different book last week, one of the ones I talked about in my books I was excited to read for 2025, and that book is the Bathysphere book, Effects of the Luminous Ocean Depths by Brad Fox. This was a phenomenal book. It is nonfiction, which is interesting because I don't really read nonfiction that often. I think I only read maybe one nonfiction book last year, if at all. But one of my goals for 2025 was to read more nonfiction, so we're starting out strong. This is an account of the life of William Beebe and his expeditions off the coast of Bermuda and the Bathysphere. So a little bit of a history lesson, and I'm going to be consulting my notes here. But William Beebe was an American naturalist, ecologist, ornithologist. He was born in the 1880s, and he died in 1963, I believe. So he completed a lot of work studying the natural world in the first half of the 20th century. Up until the Bathysphere, which we'll talk about in a second, he was most known for publishing from 1918 to 1922 his 4 volumes of a monograph of the pheasants, which was sort of this account of his expeditions around the world to all sorts of distant destinations, the Himalayas. His account of a bunch of his account of his expeditions across the world studying pheasants and birds. And an interesting fact, actually, he was sort of ahead of his time in a lot of his thinking. In 1915, he proposed the idea that bird evolution passed through a tetripteryx phase. And what that means is when birds were evolving, if you don't know, birds evolved from dinosaurs, he proposed, and this was not known at the time, but he proposed that birds passed through a phase called a tetripteryx phase, where they had 4 wings, 2 on their forelimbs like they have now, and 2 on their hind limbs. Birds don't have wings on their hind limbs now. And everyone thought he was a little bit crazy. They're like, no, there's no way, dude, that's ridiculous. Evolution wasn't even really a widely accepted idea at the time. It was still pretty controversial. But he was vindicated in 2003 when paleontologists discovered the fossil of a dinosaur called Microraptor gooey, Microraptor, which did have 4 wings, 2 on its front limbs and 2 on its hind limbs. So he was vindicated 90 years later. So yeah, a little bit ahead of his time. It also seemed like William Beebe was a bit of a socialite. He was kind of this magnetic personality. He knew a lot of people. He was in contact with a lot of people. The fantasy author, Lord Dunsany, he was in contact with Teddy Roosevelt. A greeting again. Everyone say hi to Spoons. Say hi to the people, Spoons. Wave. No. Okay, you're grumpy. But yeah, he was this magnetic personality. He knew so many people. He liked to party. He could be a bit gruff. He demanded a lot from his employees. He had several affairs, all sorts of crazy stuff. But so, what this book about? What this book is about is his expeditions from 1930 to 1934 off the coast of Bermuda, an island in Bermuda called Nonsuch Island, where he and an engineer named Otis Barton performed a series of dives in the Bathysphere, which was this steel ball. It had two quartz glass windows that they could peer out of, and is lowered into the water by a steel cable on a boat, obviously. The bathysphere is connected to the boat by the steel cable, by a tube that could carry oxygen to the bathysphere, and by a telephone cable so that William Beebe could relay what he was seeing up to the surface, where another scientist on his team was waiting to write down his observations. At the time, this was the deepest anyone had ever gone in the ocean. Their record-breaking dive off the coast of Bermuda was 3,028 feet, which is 928 meters, well into the abyssopelagic zone where light is gone. 5 minutes and we're already still on the introduction. That's fine. So that is what this book is about, but so much more. This book is interesting because instead of a normal nonfiction book where it starts at the beginning and it goes to the end and it's these long blocks of text. Oh, wait. Here's a diagram of the bathysphere. This book has awesome, gorgeous, beautiful illustrations in it. But instead of being like that with very long chapters, the bathysphere book is actually put together more like a scrapbook. It's not in chronological order. Their chapters are relatively short. For example, this chapter, The Engineer, which is talking about Otis Barton, is just 2 pages long. Well, really 1.5 pages. We get bits of William Beebe's observations as they go deeper into the ocean. For this one, 140 feet. We are 10 feet from the bottom. Illumination is like brilliant moonlight, purplish blue color. And so many of these chapters don't just touch on William Beebe's observations in the bathysphere, but also on his interactions with the people around him. There are philosophical musings on the nature of science, on light, on the ocean itself. We get a little bit of introspection, I think, into William Beebe's mind, especially as he's diving into this place that no human being has ever seen before. Is incredibly fascinating. The deeper they go, the more the light goes away. Light goes away relatively quickly in the ocean. It can't penetrate that deep. So they're seeing these creatures that have only ever been observed when they wash up to the surface and are dead. But he's seeing them in their native habitat doing what they do. There are many bioluminescent creatures, of course, meaning they produce light from their own bodies. Anglerfish, it uses its little dorsal fin here with bioluminescent bacteria to attract prey. I mean, it's just fascinating stuff. Some of the best writing in this book, Brad Fox did a fantastic job accumulating all of William Beebe's writings and writing about William Beebe and the bathysphere dives and his observations. Some of the best writing here comes from William Beebe's personal reflections on what he's seeing. And I think really a lot of this book is focused on kind of this incomprehensibility of the beauty that he's seeing. So we have this one. Perhaps it was better to signify the contents of the deep ocean with inarticulate grunts and blubbers by singing nonsense syllables or clapping one's hands. William Beebe, when he comes up, when he comes back to the surface after these dives, he has trouble relating what he's seeing because he and Otis Barton are the only two people in the world at this point that have ever seen these things. The entire second section of the book is called Spectral Visions, and it deals with how color slowly disappears the deeper into the water you go. Red goes away first, and then orange and green and yellow, until you're left with this blue, indigo, violet light. And really, you only see that when you turn the lamp on. Beyond that, it is just blackness. This section talks as well about the bioluminescence of different types of organisms in that deep sea. But what I find really fascinating is William Beebe's struggles to articulate this world that has no color. Here's a wonderful excerpt. Falling into darkness, only to have luminosity increase, Beebe was confronted with such uncertain measures of transparency. Between absence and distance, the play of smoke and velvet, the brightness of the deep formed an inner clock by which he might reset what he knew. Orange and red were vivid and wonderful, but nothing could be ever as penetrating, as shocking, as overwhelming as the luminous blue of the deep. With that bath in the background, absence of color that might be violet or might be blue, he could try to communicate what he had seen. So Beebe is really confronted by this unknown, this incomprehensibility, ineffability of the world that he is observing. A lot of Brad Fox's writing in this in this book is very poetic. It's really different from a traditional nonfiction book. He saw himself between microbe and cosmos, between cave dweller and Einstein, between copepod and whale. He saw ice ages like waves crashing against a shore, repeated rhythmic movement. But the eye of the deep was not like that. It saw him with iron sight, his pitiful excursions, his collected specimens, his underwriter's delight, the admiration of citizens. He is fascinated by how small he is in this world, how small the surface world is in comparison to the deepness of the ocean. He went down 928 meters. That's not even that far, not that deep for the ocean. That's barely over half a mile. In some places, the ocean is 6-7 miles deep. Submerging or arising into that bodilessness, blank and without language, it was as if all the infinite interconnectedness was revealed, why and how in their eternal, unexplainable play. It was sensed throughout the pure swoon of blackness, beyond light, with nothing to observe and nothing to recover. When he eventually did come back with that void in the black of his eye, it would cultivate a corner of his perception, but it would not help him. It proved nothing at all. So even with how fascinating just the story is, the Bathysphere is a very, very fascinating piece of technology. His dyes are incredibly interesting. But I think what really makes this story or this book shine is the way Brad Fox goes into William Beebe's mind, and we can sort of understand how almost maddening it would be to see these things that he was seeing that no one else in the world had seen and that no one could understand other than through his almost useless descriptions of what he was seeing. The other really amazing part of this book is the illustrations that are found throughout it. A lot of them were done by a woman named Estelle Bosselman, who was part of Beebe's expeditions. He hired her to paint what he saw based on descriptions he gave her. So we have really neat illustrations of fish like this. Not all of the illustrations and photos in this book are by Ethel Bostelman, but a good number of them are. This fish, which is on the cover as well, is illustrated by her. And then one of my, and one of my favorite illustrations in this entire novel, one of my favorite illustrations in this entire book is, oh my gosh, the light. There you go. One of my favorite illustrations in the entire book is this one. These were two incredibly large fish that Beebe reported seeing, and they have never been identified. Many of the organisms that Beebe saw have only ever been seen by him. Okay, never mind. I can't find the section, so I'll try to remember it. But he flipped on their lamp, and he saw these two large fish, 6 feet long, circling around the bathysphere, and he named them Bathysphere intacta. And they've never been seen again, so it's sort of this ocean cryptid. But very interesting, very, very fascinating little side story from that expedition. I have rambled quite a bit. I really enjoyed this book. I give it 4 stars on Goodreads. Star ratings are more or less meaningless to me, but this was just a measure of how much I enjoyed it. I would recommend the book. I think it was honestly just a really fascinating read. It's easy to read, just a couple of pages before you go to bed at night. And again, even if you're already interested in the story of the bathysphere, you're going to find so many more meanings just from Brad Fox's writings and him delving into the mind of Beebe and the companions that were on the bathysphere expeditions. So highly recommend. Thank you for watching.